All right, hello and welcome to First Bank's Center for Family-Owned Businesses webinar series. I'm Mike Vanderveld and I'll be your facilitator. Today, we'll cover the most recent updates to the Paycheck Protection Program, and then we'll turn our attention to our featured presentation on improving strategic cost management with zero-based budgeting. As a reminder, keep a lookout for First Bank emails, and as always, be sure to check our website at first.banks for the latest information. And before we get started, let me cover just a few logistics. The lines are muted, but at any time, please send us your questions through the webinar tool. For specific questions about your loan, please reach out directly to your First Bank relationship manager. We'll have about 45 minutes or so of content before opening it up for questions. And let me advance to slide number 2, and let's meet our presenters. Once again, Tim Fogerty is here, and he leads First Bank's Midwest Commercial Banking team. Joining Tim is Kate Mayfield, the Director of Credit and Underwriting here at First Bank. Our friends from Smith Wallace are on hand as well. They are David Contrera, Principal in Advisory Services, and Jenna Beckmann, Director in Advisory Services. On slide 3, you'll see our agenda. We will start with that PPP update and then shift our conversation to the zero-based budgeting. All right, slide 4 is the disclaimer, and please just bear with me a moment as I do read this. This presentation is furnished for informational use only. It is not intended to be comprehensive, nor does it constitute legal, accounting, tax, or other professional advice. We encourage you to consult with your legal, tax, and/or accounting professional for specific advice. This presentation is based on information available as of the first date and time and delivery of this presentation. Due to the evolving nature of the regulations and agency guidance addressing the Paycheck Protection Program, all information in this presentation is subject to change without notice. First Bank recommends a thorough review of the CARES Act and SBA interim final rules. These documents can be found at first.bank. All right, we are ready to dive in. I'm going to turn it to slide number 5 and pass it over to Tim Fogerty.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Today, we just want to give a quick update of a couple of items that have come up from the SBA on new issues or new questionnaires regarding the PPP program. And we're going to cover this pretty briefly here on this first topic. Last week, the SBA sent out through its portal to its lenders a PPP loan necessity questionnaire. This questionnaire is only applicable to loans or loans that combined with affiliates are of $2 million and more. So nationally and also in the bank, very similar, about 1% of the borrowers in the PPP program are applied to this questionnaire. So the purpose of the questionnaire was to facilitate the collection of supplemental information that will be used by the SBA and its reviewers to evaluate the good faith certification that was made on your application, and that there was economic uncertainty made the loan necessary. So basically, there's been controversy in the past about the need requirements for the PPP program. The SBA is sending this out to they're only requiring this for a select few loans over $2 million to complete the questionnaire. So again, on the next page, Mike, who needs to complete the questionnaire? It really is just PPP loan borrowers that loans are over $2 million or it's affiliated loans. So if you had related ownership entities that combined require are over $2 million, you're required to complete this form, and the form will be sent in. I'll tell you the process about how the form is going to be delivered in a moment. One of the reasons we haven't sent this out directly, it just came in last week through the portal. We want to give people an opportunity to look at it, but we don't want to send it out directly to you because part of the questionnaire indicated that as soon as the lender sent this document to the PPP borrower, they had 10 days to return it. Many of our borrowers aren't ready to apply for forgiveness yet, and we don't want to start the clock on that. So we have not sent that out directly. And there's 2 questionnaires. The questionnaires, one for for-profit companies and one for non-for-profit companies. So go to the next slide, Mike. So how we're going to handle this is we've put these forms, the 2 loan necessity questionnaires, for-profit, non-for-profit, out on our website. If you apply for the loans over $2 million, you can pull that down from our website and start reviewing that form. To date, we've not received any instructions from the SBA on completion of the form or how they want the form completed by borrowers, or any instructions on the details involved. So the way we are going to handle it is that we're going to make it available to our borrowers because it came directly from them on the site, and then we're going to reach out to those borrowers directly. So instead of using our program that we have right now, process for all PPP loans, we'll have an additional step for those few borrowers, less than 1%, and we'll reach out to them directly in the completion of this form. And then we will submit the form when they're ready to apply for forgiveness. We will provide them with a form, and then we need to upload the form and the documentation that's required to support the completion of the questionnaire to the SBA portal at that time. So again, not many people, very small percentage is going to apply, so we're going to handle it separately than our current forgiveness process. Next slide, please. The other change is this came about maybe about a month ago. Of the borrowers, there's 5.5 million borrowers in the PPP program. There were cases where there's been change of ownership or prospective change in ownership of those firms, mergers and acquisitions that have occurred, and there was no process in place from the SBA on how to handle those outside the SBA's normal process, which they would have to approve any change in control of those companies. So they sent out an IFR recently that defined what a change of ownership is. I'll get into that now. At least 20% of the common stock or ownership interest in the PPP borrower is sold or otherwise transferred, whether in one or more transactions, including to any affiliate or an existing owner of that entity. So if during the PPP program, they've done a 10% change of control from family members and a 15%, then they apply because they're over 20% total. If it's under 20%, it's not applicable. What we're seeing more, and we've had a handful of cases, less than 10, where the company has entered into an agreement to be sold. In those cases, generally what's happened in the past, the SBA needs to approve it, but they put a process in place that the bank could approve it, subject to putting in an escrow agreement and escrowing funds until the PPP loan was approved. So again, very, very small people that this would apply to. And if you want to go on to the next slide, actually the next slide, Mike. The borrower is still required, even if they've sold the entity, that the performance of the PPP loans and all the rules still apply to the borrower and the ownership of that borrower. And the next slide, please. So basically, what our advice to you right now is, if you're contemplating a transaction where you're going to enter in an agreement to sell your company, notify us. One of the conditions, as soon as possible. You need to provide us with a copy of the proposed agreement and other documents that we may ask for on the proposed transaction. There is a process that allows you to complete that transaction, although it requires an escrow account to be set at the bank in the amount of the PPP loan. But that way, it does not require an SBA approval of that transaction, which could take up to 90 days. So what we're asking clients, if you're thinking about a transaction that would apply, please contact us and we'll work with you individually on how to make sure that that process, how the sale can occur on a timely manner.
Okay, Tim, I think you're muted there, sorry.
I'm sorry, Mike. How long was I accidentally muted it. I don't know how long was I muted.
Good, maybe just 20 seconds or so.
Okay. So again, on this topic of change of ownership or sale of the business, please contact as soon as possible, and we will help you arrange for a process where we can that follows the SBA rules, so you can complete your transaction. On the next part of this, we're going to talk about the 3508S form. The SBA came out with a new form for forgiveness for loans, a streamlined form with very few calculations that applies to borrowers under $50,000. This makes up a huge percentage, probably 80% of the loans made in the PPP program were under $50,000. So this is a streamlined form, and we want to present it here today. I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Tim. So you skipped ahead on me. I'd actually like to go back a slide, please. Okay, so this is a copy of the top half of the 3508S form that was released in October of this year. You can apply for forgiveness using this form only if the PPP loan that you received is $50,000 or less, and if you and your affiliates combined have total PPP loans of less than $2 million. If combined with your affiliates you're over 2, then you're going to have to use the 3508 or the 3508 Easy form. So this form is streamlined because it requires fewer calculations and less documentation to be provided, but that does not mean that no documentation is required. I will talk more about this later. So briefly about the 3508S form, it's only 2 pages long. Most of it involves you initialing next to various representations and certifications. The snapshot at the bottom of this slide shows the entirety of the fillable boxes on the form. So as you can see, it's pretty short. Furthermore, when you get the form from us, it's going to be pre-filled with all the information that we already have on our system. So most of the details, including loan number, amount, relevant dates, are going to be pre-filled. Really, the only things that you need to fill out are the number of employees and the amount of any economic impact disaster loan that you have. So after you finish that, then you'll initial next to the certifications on the bottom half of the page. Basically says the information you're submitting is true and correct and that the funds were used for proper purposes. Once you complete this, then you're done with the form, but you are not done with the process. So now you can move to the next slide. Okay, so you still need to gather and attach all supporting documentation that goes with your application. Failure to include documentation with an application is the #1 cause of incomplete apps, which is the #1 cause of delays in the forgiveness process. So this slide shows you a summary of the documentation requirements that we need. You need to submit this information along with your app in order for the app to be considered complete. So this slide shows a quick summary. Don't worry about writing everything down on the slide. The information on the slide also comes along with your forgiveness application. So we provide plenty of information to guide you through this process. Next slide, please. To help out a little more, I'll also give you some best practices on submitting for forgiveness. So if you already have your application, that's great. If you don't have your application yet, but would like to receive it, you can initiate that process by going to our website, go to the COVID-19 section, and partway down, there's a box that says, click here to apply for PPP loan forgiveness. You'll answer a handful of questions, and it determines which form you're eligible for. And then within 24 hours, we will send you a copy of that form. Regardless of what form you get, the full, the easy, the S, all these best practices apply to all the forms. #1, make sure you fill out the entire form. If you see any red arrows pointing at blank cells, it means that you are not finished with the form. #2, regardless of what application you get, it will include a certifications page. It's probably the 2nd or 3rd tab on the Excel sheet. Do not skip this page. You need to initial next to each representation and then type in your name and title at the bottom. And the name and title of the person at the bottom is who also needs to sign the app. And regarding the signer of the app, ideally the signer is going to be the same person who signed for the PPP note in the first place. Our system is set up to use the same signer on the forgiveness app that signed the original note. We occasionally do get some requests to change the signer to a different person, but if you want to do this, we're going to need a separate resolution to do this. So it's definitely much simpler if you just have the same person who signed the note sign the forgiveness. #4, do not retitle the application or change the file type. We use bots to process the app digitally, and changing the name can slow it down. I mean, it's not a deal breaker, it just can slow it down. Finally, last but not least, do not forget to attach your supporting documentation and send it in along with your app. If you have lots of supporting documents, which is common, and they won't fit on one email, that's fine. Go ahead and send multiple emails and break it up into little batches. It helps to keep the subject line the same for all of the emails. It helps us keep it sorted. Next slide, please. One last common source of confusion is the covered period. There's a lot of misunderstanding out there about what the covered period means. So your covered period starts on the day that your loan is funded, and it runs for either exactly 8 weeks or exactly 24 weeks, depending on when your loan was funded. So if you were part of the first round of PPP, you have the choice between 8 weeks and 24. If you were part of a later round, then you're automatically 24. Regarding the funding date, you don't need to worry about remembering what your funding date was. We'll pre-populate that for you on your app, so don't worry about it. There's also an option to use an alternative covered period. This concept exists because the SBA realizes that your funding date probably didn't precisely line up with the beginning of your payroll period. So your alternative covered period, if you opt to use it, begins on the first day of the payroll cycle that begins immediately after your loan disbursement date. So if you got your loan on April 10th and your next payroll period began on April 15th, then your covered period begins on 4/10 and your alternative covered period begins on April 15th. Your alternative covered period cannot begin before your funding date. I see a lot of apps that say that the alternative began before the funding date, but it just doesn't make sense because you can't have been using funds before you receive them. So alternative has to start after the funding date. That is the end of my advice. So Tim, I'll give it back to you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Kate, and thanks for that update. And we're encouraging people that are ready to apply. We stand ready. We have, I believe, 60 days from when we get the information to send it in the SBA portal for forgiveness. We're doing it much quicker than that. We're able to validate things very quickly. So we stand ready to start taking applications and encourage you to apply if you're ready. So thank you, Kate. Next topic, we're really pleased today to have our friends and partners at Brown Smith Wallace as a presenter. As you know, they've been presenters in the past helping us with the PPP program, and we've asked them today to speak to the issue of budgeting and zero-based budgeting. We're really pleased to have Dave Contrera, a Principal Advisory Service at Brown Smith Wallace, and Jenna Beckmann, Director of Advisory Service at Brown Smith Wallace, as our presenters today. So thank you, and we look forward to your presentation.
All right, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dave Contrera, and I have the pleasure of leading the BPC team here at Brown Smith Wallace. My background is in financial operations management as well as process improvement. The majority of my career with AB was spent leading operational finance teams in the breweries on the East Coast, as well as managing some global process improvement initiatives surrounding primarily automation efforts as well as pure process improvement initiatives. I've had the opportunity to lead several cost management initiatives across large organizations, normally and primarily focused around core working capital improvements, including controllable expense reduction, as well as operational cash flow management. More recently, I've had the opportunity, after joining Brown Smith Wallace, to focus on cost reduction and process improvement efforts with several mid-tier St. Louis-based businesses. I look forward to sharing our team's experience and past successes executing strategic cost management initiatives. Jenna?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Jenna Beckmann, and I am a director here on our business performance consulting team at Brown Smith Wallace. I started my career at PricewaterhouseCoopers as a management consultant focused on finance effectiveness and process improvements. And before joining Dave here at BSW, I spent 5 years at Anheuser-Busch in a variety of different roles, including accounting, integrations, and finance. And I also had the opportunity to lead our Solutions Excellence program, which focused on process improvements, benchmarking, and best practice sharing. So excited to go through the presentation with you guys today. Kick this off, Dave.
All right, thank you. Hello, everyone again. Why strategic cost management, or why sustainable cost management? There are different situations that make it difficult to generate a profit for businesses, with no better example right now than our current ongoing pandemic, which is adding to the more traditional drivers such as the competitive pressures that face our businesses, reduced customer demand, increasing raw material and input costs. As you know, there are many highly skilled experts surveying and forecasting the ongoing impact of our COVID-19 pandemic. As the slide shows, for example, it's estimated that 7 of 10 Americans will not feel comfortable attending a sporting event prior to a vaccine fully implemented. The economy is anticipated to shrink at least 11% by year end versus last year, and only 1/3 of Americans right now would take a commercial flight, see a movie in a theater, or visit a theme park in the near future. So basically, regardless of where you align on the future of the comments shared on the slide here, the challenges exist, drive home the overall case for taking immediate action to establish your controllable cost strategy going forward. I'll get us started here. If we can flip one more. All right. Our discussion today will include how to develop a structured cost management approach. We'll share cost reduction tools such as zero-based budgeting to help you better manage your costs. And we'll also share a method to implement structured routine, which is critical in sustaining your cost reduction efforts to ensure you achieve your focused performance results desired. Our methodologies and tools can be used with a variety and size of companies. As I mentioned, we've both been involved in the larger CPG type corporations implementing ZBB and these budgeting initiatives, as well as across several of the smaller businesses here in St. Louis in recent years. And we can switch slides, please. Before implementing a cost management strategy, it's important that we answer the two questions. One is where you want to be and what steps do you want to take to get there. Our discussion today should help align your controllable cost strategies with your overall financial objectives for your business. We'll share approaches we have seen be successful, as well as tools you can pick and choose from as a toolkit to implement to help you achieve your objectives. And we'll click one more if we could, please. This slide here basically is highlighting the different actions that we'll talk about today that can have a significant impact on an organization's costs. These require different amount of time and investment, but also have different paybacks. Our methodology combines utilizing quick wins, such as immediate tightening of controls around overhead spend, including reduction of travel expenses, marketing spend, training, and recruitment expenses as examples. And we'll also cover in detail the benefit of implementing a zero-based budget in total. When these efforts are sustained in practice, we see a delivery of about 5 to 10% in cost reduction savings. On the next section of the slide there, the performance improvement piece, we recommend using formal performance improvement efforts, such as lean process reviews, standardization and standardizing transaction processing activities and implement cost of quality reduction teams to reduce waste and rework in any of your operations. Primarily, that last item focuses on our manufacturing clientele. We've seen these performance improvement initiatives result in as much as 15% cost reduction on the average. Additionally, on the third item there, the organizational realignment, hang on one second. Encompassing shared service concepts in your realignment of your organization. Automation, implementing additional automation and robotics, as was mentioned earlier in the session, can deliver up to an additional 20% reduction in costs. Paybacks are business specific. Those are all estimates and are very much business specific and vary with the level of effort and investment made, and are often impacted by the culture of the business. Certain businesses often have a culture of that moves a little quicker or a little slower than the norm, but in any case, there is a reduction of cost achieved if the appropriate sustainability processes are put in place. It's very important to understand the effort involved in these initiatives and the effort of change management required around implementing these initiatives in order to accurately really project your savings forecasts for the individual business. We can click one more. Thanks. Jenna will cover 3 different tools today that can be applied to achieve each of the areas I just walked through. The first will include ZBB implementation as a quick win. The second will be our fast track methodology and rapid assessment tools that can be used to drive performance improvement in your organization. And lastly, how to use a structured resource analysis tool to drive organizational realignment decisions. And at that point, I will click over to Jenna to go through zero-based budgeting. Thank you.
All right, so zero-based budgeting, or how we refer to it as ZBB, is different from our traditional budgeting that we often see with our clients in that all spending is justified. So oftentimes we'll see as organizations go through a budgeting cycle, you just justify increases from the prior year, either being the actuals or budget. However, with ZBB, no expenses are assumed, and we'll start with a zero base, hence the name. So the big key with it, and I think one of the reasons why we enjoy using ZBB, is that all funding must be tied to a goal that supports the company's mission and strategic priorities. So we always go back to every expense and outlining which part of our mission or strategic priority are we achieving. You want to go to the next slide. So according to APQC, which is the American Productivity Quality Center, in 2019, last year, approximately 10% of businesses experimented with zero-based budgeting. And we expect that number to continue to grow with our current environment. So this budgeting methodology, we take both a top-down as well as a detailed bottoms-up approach. And this will bring visibility to all of your costs, which allows companies to identify and eliminate redundancy in those non-value add activities that your staff might be performing. So if you're looking to implement a structured approach to your cost management, or if you're looking to reset your cost baseline, we recommend this methodology for your organization. And I know we said on the last slide about 5 to 10% is what we see, especially when we're benchmarking, but we've seen organizations experience up to 10 to 25% overhead spend reduction after implementing and sustaining zero-based budgeting, which is huge. I want to jump to the next slide. So right here, these 5 little buckets, we say this is our baseline when we start to roll out ZBB. So for implementation, we're starting at ground zero. Here, we're creating a budget from scratch. So if you're a startup company and have never had a budget previously, this is perfect. And if you have had your business for a while, we're still going to start from scratch. We can use last year's actuals as a baseline, which we recommend more so than using a prior year budget as your baseline. And then we start to evaluate. So that second bucket, evaluating every cost, every expense that you had in a prior period, and identify and eliminate any unnecessary activities. And then we start to justify all components in that budget and identifying any costs and making sure that they're all relevant, and also looking for the savings opportunities, which leads to that fourth bucket of streamlining. So figuring out what activities should be performed and how they should be performed, looking for automation opportunities, standardization to help drive different efficiencies and cost savings. And that last bucket is putting it all together and executing and rolling out our plan. And with that, we'll go into that a little bit later, but it's key to make sure we're communicating all roles and responsibilities. Thank you. So the next one. So when we get started on this and we're looking at the key budget components, we're always looking at our gross revenue, cost of goods sold, and operating expenses. And today we're going to focus with ZBB. Our main focus is always on driving savings in your operating expenses bucket. Go ahead and jump to the next slide. Perfect. All right, so here's just an example. This is industry agnostic, but this often will vary based on your organization and what industry you're in. So when building out a zero-based budget, we recommend categorizing all of your costs into different packages or categories. So here's an example of different packages that can be used for your overhead spend. And oftentimes what we see here is the people package being the largest expense for our company. So what do we mean by this? People package. This would consist of things like your compensation and payroll. It would include not just base pay, but also any overtime, sales commissions, payroll taxes, benefits. If you're relocating any employees, it would be rolled up in this package. Any recruiting or employee training expenses could also roll up in this bucket. Some other ones that you'll see on here, institutional. Oftentimes we'll say, what's that? What we think of here is anything that's affecting your company's reputation or outreach. If you do any special events, engagement events for your employees, or any memberships that you're a part of in the community to build your network, or any charitable donations that you might do, we would say would fall into that bucket. Looking at sales, we do break out sales and marketing. Sales, we're looking at anything that's going to drive our revenue up or generate any uplift in sales. Fees, we like to bucket consulting, insurance. If you have any audit fees, we would put together. When we're looking at technology, we might just be looking more so at our applications, data, licenses, because we're looking just at our operating, we don't typically include any capital expenditures in this budget. If you're in manufacturing, or if you have inventory, supply chain overhead, any obsolescence or transportation penalties, we often see a lot, we might bucket together there. So again, we try to stay as industry agnostic on here, but we can really narrow in and help people build out what this is. But having those categories really helps you understand your expenses and see where we're at. If you want to jump to the next slide. So I broke out from an example where we helped a local St. Louis company with building out a ZBB budget. It was their first time ever going through a budget, but they've been in business for quite a while. So looking at their actuals, this is just a utilities package example. And you can see this is just an Excel. So you don't need a budgeting system to do ZBB. I mean, I do a personal budget with ZBB as well. So here with their utilities, we looked at all of their prior year expenses and broke out the different expense type. You can see sewer, gas, electric, phone, internet, and also looking at their different vendors, the frequencies, and making assumptions on their monthly and annual amounts. And then took this to calendarize it out. And as we're going through here, one of the key things that we're always looking for are what are our savings opportunities. So when we put this together, the first thing that popped out was looking at their phone. Why do we have different providers for our phone? Is there an opportunity there for savings by using the same supplier? Also looking at phone and internet, a different supplier there. Is there an opportunity for savings by bundling within the same vendor in that category? So very simple and easy to do. Again, no system required here. And if you want to jump to the next one, and that is really small. Hopefully you can see a little bit of that, but this was also part of the budget build that we did for the local company. So looking at their people package, and here we recommend going down to the employee level. And it seems very cumbersome and time consuming up front, but as people move within the organization and being able to track by department is key. And also making sure we're looking at more than just your base pay. So looking at that variable compensation, the bonus or sales compensation there, the health insurance and payroll taxes, any profit sharing or 401k matching plans. We would also add in here any training dollars that you tie to each employee or based on your head count. And building this out, it helps when you have this detailed level that you can then roll up as employees transition, or if you have wage increases, is extremely beneficial. Jump to the next one. All right, so here, when we're rolling this out, one of the key things is we want to drive this constructive dialogue and healthy conflict. And we recommend setting up this shared ownership via this matrix model. So here we have owners for each of the expense packages or categories that we showed you a little few slides back. And then we also recommend having owners for each of your different departments. So if you have a person in IT, finance, HR, sales, however your organization is structured, having different owners, not just by expense package, but also for each of those departments. And they play a different role here. So your department or your entity owners are really driving and leading the business cycle and budget development because they know and understand their own cost drivers. And they're responsible for managing their entity budget. While you have the package or the expense category owners managing all costs across all entities within their package. And their role is really to establish those guidelines and spread any best practices based on industry standards across all of the entities. Go to the next one. All right, so a couple of key requirements for success if you're thinking about rolling this out. Number one is that structured schedule and routine. So we'll give a little recommendation on the next slide of what that can look like. But making sure we have clear ownership over the cost. So using that matrix model and understanding the different roles and responsibilities. And making sure that we have owners over each of the packages and departments. And making sure that they're aware what are their expectations, what are their deadlines, what is the routine, and making sure that they have a process in place. I think this is one of the big things, having a process in place to review expenses and approve them before they're incurred. This allows them to ensure that the expense still addresses their strategic priority and they can make any changes before it's too late. So in order for them to be successful, that it's key that they have visibility into their costs routinely in order to allow them to make any changes and reset their short-term goals in order to hit their overall budget. And of course, it doesn't hurt to have a target or incentive for each owner to hold them accountable to hitting your overall budget goals. Next. All right, so when we're talking routine and planning cycle, this really helps ensure consistency and routine across your organization. And it's really starting at the beginning of the year with your long-term strategic plan, which can include much more than just your financial outlook. but then getting more specific throughout the year. So moving from that 3-year plan in Q1, going to a 1-year plan in Q2, and then ultimately down to your detailed budget before end of year. And that 1-year strategic plan is one of the most important parts of this process. So during that time is when we can be looking for the cost package and department owners to identify and dive into savings opportunity planning. So similar to when we were looking at the utilities and looking how can we make adjustments here, diving into those savings across all of your expenses and sharing best practices and identifying any opportunities for standardization. And that's also the time when you're looking at all of the activities in your organization along with their costs and understanding what's the consequence if I don't do something, or do I have an alternative in the way that I'm performing this to drive savings? And then feeding all of those that output and those savings opportunities into your top down and eventually your bottom up budget. And then that little bar there at the bottom, having that ongoing monthly tracking, monitoring, reporting is key, along with if your organization does a forecast, highly recommend it to look out each month where you think you're going to end up for the rest of the year. Hop to the next one. Thank you. So if this is your first time hearing of ZBB or learning about it, this might sound like a lot of work. Why would you want to do this? And you are right, and that this is definitely cultural shift and can be very time consuming up front, but there are several benefits to not only implementing but sustaining zero-based budgeting. And the key here is that you are ensuring that all of your costs will be aligned with your earnings strategy. You know, I mentioned that at the beginning, but that is one of the #1 benefits here. And by reviewing your priorities of your business and how your expenses are going to address those, you're really avoiding cutting expenses across the board, which is nobody really ever wants to do. And additionally, bringing that shared ownership and routine drives transparency across your organization. It encourages communication between the different departments. And we also see operational improvements on the accuracy, efficiencies, whenever you do take the steps to eliminate any redundancies or non-value add activities. And hopefully you are freeing up some of your sustaining dollars throughout here that you can reinvest in your company to achieve your goals. Next. All right, so to get started, people are like, where do I even begin if I'm interested in moving forward here? So the first 3 steps, one is identifying who are your owners going to be and making sure that you have a cross-functional team that is committed to rolling this out. And then determining what are your objectives, what's your strategy and scope, making sure that everybody's aligned and you have buy-in from your different owners. And then 3 is obtaining your spending visibility. So getting your actuals from prior periods so that you can start doing a deep dive and build out your assumptions. And also identifying any future commitments that have that you would need to factor into your budget as well. All right, and I'm going to turn it over to Dave to walk through some ideas on how you can roll out some different process improvements to identify savings here.
All right, Dave, go ahead and just unmute there.
All right. Hold on a second. I'm just process improvements. I'm unmuted now. We can get rolling.
Good to go.
Okay. When conducting a rapid assessment and process review, there are several key opportunities to consider. In accounts payable, for instance, two-way matching, invoice elimination through the use of evaluated receipt settlement, ACH payments, online invoicing, and centralization of and have high returns on investment. Additionally, require W-9s with your vendor set up on the first payment to eliminate any issues downstream and having to accumulate them at a later date. Within accounting and the financial close process, Focusing on the standardization is key. Journal entry automation, policies and procedures, checklists are highly effective in this area. And standard ERP software and chart of accounts also help streamline month-end activities and reporting. For payroll, minimize payroll runs, eliminate off-cycle runs, correcting payroll runs, etc. Automate the timekeeping. There's several good automation tools out there nowadays for small and mid-tier businesses. Utilize direct deposit, mandate direct deposit, and simplify commission and bonus plans. Very often we see significant effort around commission and bonus plans that are really driving very little on the sales side results. These actions can significantly reduce effort and drive efficiencies overall. And we often see this in the area of outsource for additional cost savings. Process improvement opportunities for consideration in the along the next three categories: travel and entertainment, accounts receivable, HR and recruiting. Basically, to drive savings and process improvements within travel and expenses, implement and enforce a travel policy. We see several organizations without a standard travel policy, which generates a wide variety of spend across different individuals in the organization. Use a single travel agent or a travel tool, and encourage virtual meetings, which are now all experts. We're all experts on. Automated employee expense tools will also drive savings in this area, such as Contrera, etc. And on the accounts receivable side, require advanced payments and retainers. It sounds like a no-brainer, but the use of retainers, we see very limited use of retainers or advanced payments up front. Use a single collection database and resolve operational root cause of errors such as incorrect shipping modes on orders up front prior to the actual shipments taking place. It cleans up your overall order to cash process. The big hitter within HR and recruiting is a self-service portal and centralization of temporary staffing and recruiting efforts. The self-service portal drives a lot of efficiency and also helps drive the understanding of the internal staff into their benefits and the opportunities that the company is offering. Centralization of temporary staffing, elimination of multiple organizations providing temporary staffing and doing recruiting for you, very often it can generate some significant savings. These drive time savings, but centralization of temp staffing can also drive the volume discounts by using single select agencies. And we'll click to the next. Sustainability. Jenna?
All right. So we went through quite a bit today, but the key thing to make this stick, and we want this to be sustainable. So upon implementing any type of cost reduction or management strategy, it's important to put different processes in place to maintain that and to maintain the sustainability. So a couple things here that we recommend. So tracking and visibility. You know, we talked about it a little bit before, but having that visibility and being able to track and adapt or change direction as needed is key. Without that visibility, it's hard to make any informed strategic decisions. Performance incentives, having your owners aligned, their bonuses aligned with the initiatives that you roll out is key. That proper structure, making sure you have the right ZBB principles and policies in place, as well as any different processes and relevant tools, different tracking tools. And that last one, always ensuring that your cost management structure evolves with your mission and strategy. Can't enforce that piece enough. And go to the next one. All right, so in addition for sustainability, it's important to have this, change your organization to have this cost management culture. Making sure that you have managers in place that can act as role models and be cost focused. And also being consistent and having persistent enforcement as well as strong controls are super important. And making sure that your culture values ownership from your employees, Responsibility as well as accountability is also key here. All right, Dave, do you want to close us out here?
Oh, shit. Focuses on budgeting, forecasting, financing, collections, procurement, and payments, an end-to-end look. For optimal results, a cost culture is ownership from all departments and all staff levels, not just the finance team involved and along with senior leadership. A monthly routine, we mentioned that routine for sustainability should start on about the 4 days before the end of a month with pre-close, in which where the performance managers actually review their expenses that are coming in or rolling through for the month versus the forecasts they have put in the system for where they would be. This is where they begin investigating variances, making any corrections for errors in posting, and basically ensure that everything is classified correctly and accruals are in the right places. On the benchmark finance organizations normally close their, target to close their books in 1 to 3 working days and then transition to reporting and forecasting. Timeliness of the financials is critical to provide reaction time if things are starting to flow through the financials that are going to significantly impact the business going forward. All variances from the forecast should be explained and submitted for approval along with action plans developed and tracked monthly. Normally you target around the 10th or 11th workday of a month to hold your performance review meetings where all the participants come together, discuss their forecasts, talk about their action plans to correct any errors, and review meetings as well as at that point there's very often KPIs, key performance indicators reviewed, and all the action plans are aligned and made sure that they're not conflicting with other areas of the business. It's important, though, to continuously set targets for the organization and compare your metrics against internal targets as well as industry-wide benchmarks to help identify areas for improvement. You can use sources such as Moody's, Gartner, APQC, as Jenna mentioned earlier in the presentation, to do benchmarking with like industries. We frequently take our clients through a rapid assessment and where we do include the benchmarking process to help them identify which improvement areas to target. Having visibility to your metrics through the use of a dashboard is often very helpful and becoming much more prevalent in most industries, and really a very simple and readily available method for the organization to be aligned with the financials of the company. And at that, I will say thank you for your time, and we'll take any questions or answer any questions that have been added to the chat. And thank you again for your time.
All right, very good. Thanks so much for that. And as a quick reminder, just go ahead and type a question into the webinar tool and we will get that asked to our presenters. Let me start with one here, and that question, sorry, one sec. That question says, is this really applicable to small businesses?
Yep, I'll take that. Yes, we will say there's methods which we use, like when Jenna mentioned the package owners and the entity owners. Very often in smaller businesses, there's less people involved than a large organization where you're trying to disperse the responsibility for the budget and the controlling the costs. But with that, it's still very applicable to those groups. Normally, you just have more focus around the packages than you do across the entities and spreading the focus of the budget. Everyone has expenses and everyone has a tendency to inflate from prior year, not going back and thinking, as Jenna mentioned, even on your personal expenses, going back and looking at what do I really need to spend, how does that fit into my overall target for the year, and is this something I want to carry forward or use those funds in a better working method. Many times you're trying to move funds away from non-working funds, non-sales generating or non-profit generating areas, and it applies across all businesses basically.
All right, very good. Thank you for that. And again, I have a few questions here about asking if the session is being recorded. It is, and we'll put that recording on First.Bank soon after we end, so be on the lookout for that. Another question here says, you mentioned change management as important for success in this budgeting process. What is one critical change management skill needed?
Well, I think the ability to assess the organization and stakeholder needs within the organization. I think you need to have a good, solid review of what are all the core stakeholders within the ownership of the business, within the actual working core of the business. What is everyone, where are they, what are they thinking? Why is this important for them? And make sure you develop a communication plan that aligns what you're trying to implement to the needs of the individual stakeholders, to make sure that it goes in as smooth as possible and there's very little noise, as we always refer to it, in the implementation.
Excellent, very good. Thanks for that. Another question here. How many annual iterations does it normally take for a business to gain the skills and see the benefits of this process?
Normally, I will say this. I've participated in large company startups of ZBB. The first year is really very much a storming year where people are learning the process, not understanding why there's such a routine attached, et cetera. But in the second year, usually it becomes very normal and very much the way the organization begins to think. And you also begin to utilize it to utilize the process to help drive needs specific to your department. So you can be looking at your existing expenses from the prior year or non-working areas and plan to move them into areas that are going to improve your next year's performance overall. So really it becomes a mindset that the managers, become engaged with and utilize to their advantage as they go forward. Especially when you're tying directly to like a 3 or 5 year financial plan, it allows you to focus on what do I need to do to get my piece accomplished for the organization to get to the ultimate financial plan results.
All right, very good. Thanks so much again for those questions and the answer. At this time, Tim, I wanted to bring you back here. I know we have just 2 quick minutes left. And if you could, Tim, just unmute and tell us a little bit about the next session that's coming up here. And Tim, there you go. I got you unmuted. There you go.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike. I just got unmuted. Well, first of all, let me just thank Dave and Jenna for the presentation today. We had a really strong audience today, very topical and really good content. So thank you very much. On our next webinar, we're really going to be in a little different direction than this financial kind of webinar we had today. Our next webinar is scheduled for December the 8th from the Center for Family-Owned Business at First Bank. The topic for next month is managing conflict in family-owned businesses. Our presenters are going to include Michael Dearberg, who is our chairman of First Bank. And as a family-owned bank and business, Mike is very passionate about family-owned business and brings a great perspective on this issue. Joining Michael in this presentation will be Caitlin Erb, PhD and consultant with CMA and Associates. CMA focuses on family-owned businesses and consulting in generational transformation of businesses and all sorts of different topics. So this being one of them. So we're really excited about next month's webinar, and we'll be sending out invitations on that very soon. Mike, I'll hand it back to you.
All right, thanks so much. I'm going to wrap us up. Thank you all for joining us today. A special thank you to Tim and Kate and Dave and Jenna for their time and expertise. Really much appreciated. Please do take just a couple of moments to complete a brief survey that's going to pop up right after you exit the session to help us improve our service to you. With that said, have a great day, everyone. We'll catch you next time.